welcome to Finextra TV. I'm Hannah Wallace, and we're here at the Infosys Finacle Conclave 2019 in Dubai. Joining me now is Sanat Rao to talk a bit about the event. Hello Sanat, thank you very much for joining us.
Hi Hannah, thank you for coming here.
It's good to see you again. So yes, let's talk a bit about the event. First off, the theme, Scale Digital. Can you run me through the theme and the thought behind it?
Sure. Hannah, digital transformation has been embarked upon by many institutions, not just in the banking industry, but indeed in other industries as well. And when we did a survey jointly with EFMA earlier this year, we were not surprised to find that as low as 17% of the institutions had actually deployed digital at scale. So a lot of projects have been started, but only 17% have actually deployed that at scale. And our proposition today is that while a lot of organizations are indeed doing the right thing by looking at digital deployment, the challenge really for them is going to be to take it to scale. Because only when they take it to scale will they see enterprise-wide differentiation. And we thought it's a very relevant topic for the institutions today. And we link that to the city of Dubai, because this city 45, 50 years ago had no electricity and practically no water. Today it's got the tallest hotel, it's got the tallest residential tower, it's got the tallest building in the world. Everything in the city is about scale. And we thought therefore what this city represents fits in beautifully with some of the challenges that the banking industry is facing.
A very good analogy there. And I'm going to talk a bit about Infosys' priorities, but first let's talk about the priorities of the banks. What do you think they need to be taking into account as they scale digital?
Sure. I think on the basis of the experience that we've had with a variety of different banks, there are obviously different aspects of this transformation. And I'll deal with a few of them. First is that as we recognize from experiences in other parts of the industry, and indeed from other industries, there's a rapid shift that's happening from a traditional pipeline and a non-linear business model towards a platform business model. I think banks are recognizing that their own role is changing. They're no longer just the traditional bank which is producing a set of traditional products and distributing to clients. The expectation of the banks is that they bring a much wider array of products and services available, many of them manufactured by the bank, but indeed some which are not manufactured by the bank. And make those available not just through the bank-owned channels, but indeed by channels through non-bank third-party channels. Sure. And I think the day is not very far off. You're already seeing examples where banking is being infused into the lives of people. So for example, in a smart home, there are automation devices today which are helping you in your banking-related transactions, right? And I think the challenge for banks is going to be to successfully embed banking into the lifestyle of people. And that makes the whole context of doing banking a lot more fun for the individual. So I think one fundamental shift is towards the platform business model. The second element, I think, is towards bringing an organization to be a lot more agile, which is to break down the different silos that currently exist within the institution and to make it a much more cohesive institution such that the benefit and the impact of this can be seen across different functions in the organization. We were talking to a bank in Europe recently, and we were amazed that this bank has chosen to define its structure on the basis of around 35 customer journeys. And what they've said is that the structure of the organization would be adapted to the respective customer journey, which means for a particular customer journey, if the organization structure has to be such that it breaks down the boundaries between the different functions, then the structure will change to adapt to that customer journey. So I think banks are recognizing that there has to be a lot more agility within the organization, and they're willing to adapt to ensure that the agility is done at scale. I think the third element is really around automation and leveraging of new technologies and so on. And there's a lot that's already been said around deployment of cloud, looking at open source, exposing APIs so that the benefit is seen not just by the bank's own channels, but indeed by third-party channels as well. So I think that's the third element. The fourth element, I think, is that banks today are no longer using the excuse that they have very often done in the past, which is to say that we are large, complex, and therefore we will not make a change. There's no one-size-fits-all approach, but the banks have recognized that they have to deal with the issue of making that change at the back end so that there's front-to-back transformation. a lot of banks have deployed new technology, modern technology at the front end, but they're recognizing that at the back end, they still have legacy systems from 40, 50 years ago. So they're looking at a progressive change. It's not as we're going to rip and replace everything overnight, but that change has already started. So I think there is a message in the initiatives that banks have taken around the gradual modernization of the application landscape within the banks. The fifth and last point is probably the most interesting one, which is that I think the successful banks are recognizing that this transformation is not about technology. It's about technology on the one hand for sure, but it's also about people. And I think increasingly when you look at the organizations that have successfully done this, the cultural aspect comes across very, very strongly. So a lot of organizations are recognizing that there is a cultural transformation, that there is a people transformation, and there's a recognition that your frontline, your staff, need to be enabled towards constant reskilling, training, making data available to them, on the fly. And all of that element of marrying the softer elements of transformation with the technology that's being deployed is what is going to cohesively make this big change. So I think we've touched upon 5 broad points, and I think all of these are various ingredients. We do, of course, recognize that in banks, not all the 5 will go at the same pace, and not all 5 necessarily need to undergo to the same degree of transformation. But I think when a bank looks at enterprise-wide transformation, they need to look at all of these 5 and do what is required so that there's a complete and a more comprehensive change across the organization.
And I've spoken there about changing expectations, needs of banks, the progress and the transition, but what I'd love to hear now is how Infosys Finacle is placed to meet these changes. So take it away.
Oh, we're doing many things, and I think if I were to touch on all of those, it'll take a long time, but let me just maybe focus on a handful of them. First and foremost, like I mentioned in my previous response, I think we recognize that for this to be applicable across the enterprise, it has to be a front-to-back transformation. And therefore, while our own genesis was really as a core banking player at the back end, we are today playing a very big role in helping customers at the middle layer, the customer engagement layer, and at the front end, which is the experience layer. So I think architecturally, we've ensured that our stack is segregated such that the experience, the engagement, and the back-end digital engines are decomposed. They're capable of being deployed independently. And indeed, many of our relationships start at one of these 3 layers and extend towards the others. So I think we play a front to back, but architecturally segregated. That's number one. Number 2 is that everyone is talking cloud. Unlike a few years ago where the question was, should we go on the cloud? That's no longer a relevant question. I can't think of a single conversation in the last 2 years where someone in the bank said, should we go to the cloud? The question is how do I go to the cloud? And we do recognize that there is no one single path towards that. So like the banks who are on a journey towards moving to the cloud, we as a solution provider are on our own journey. Many of our solutions today are cloud native. Everything new that we build is going to be built on the cloud, so it's a cloud first strategy. And we recognize that there is a journey for ourselves from being Finacle on the cloud to being cloud native and eventually moving in the very near future into a cloud only kind of scenario. Right? So that's the second element. The third element, of course, is around what we as a solution provider can bring to our clients by way of an ecosystem. We're looking at Finacle as a platform, and what that really means is that Finacle as a portfolio is going to make available a lot of capability to banks. But more than that, we recognize that there are going to be elements which we necessarily don't produce or manufacture, but which come from third-party partners of ours. And we're going to make all of that available, both in terms of a banking portfolio and a non-banking portfolio towards, theater tickets, travel tickets, and so on and so forth. Other elements around the lifestyle. We've got about 40 pre-integrated third-party products through an e-commerce platform, which is available out of the box to clients. So what they really get is Finacle, but a whole host of complementary capability, which is not manufactured by us, but sourced from third parties. And all of that makes the whole proposition a lot more comprehensive. So that's the third element. Last but not the least, we recognize that for us to deal with banks who are going through this big transformation, we need to change ourselves. So today, I lead, and all of my leaders lead a very, very strong initiative within our own organization around a cultural transformation for ourselves. Right? we recognize that we need to change, and if tomorrow we're going to be the partners for banks who are going to cater to the requirements of the future, right? There's a lot that we need to change ourselves. So I think we are putting a lot of focus towards enabling our own staff to be able to be better prepared to dealing with the banks of tomorrow, and therefore we are marrying all of the technology deployments that we're doing and all of the technology research that we're doing on the one hand with cultural transformation on the other. Because like I said, in the context of the changes the banks are seeing, we recognize that our own people need to change so that we bring the best of people and technology.
So on the journey together.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Sanat, I know you're a very busy man at this event, so I'll let you get back. But thank you very much for coming and share your insights.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for coming to Conclave, and see you soon.